Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Grieving Voices. Today, my guest is Kristjana Hillberg. She is a content creator, avid connector, and freelance mentor. She has 10 plus years of experience in the client experience industry and is driven to help all women that she comes in contact with unlock their potential and succeed. As a mentor, Kristjana's focus is to empower women to start a side hustle or leave their 9 to 5 job completely to become their own boss. Hallelujah. She has worked with various clients and industries from entertainment to e-commerce, as well as experts in the areas of pediatric sleep and play therapy. Her work is included on brand strategies, marketing campaigns, and has been a core team member on a few founding behavioral and physical health teams. Kristjana resides in the Black Hills of South Dakota with her family, and she's a military spouse and enjoys thrifting, eating scones at the local bakery, and prides herself in being an aerialist in the circus. How fun. She's also the podcaster of the podcast, Your Freelance Friend, The Red Door. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We are neighbors. I'm in North Dakota. You're in South Dakota. So much fun.
I love it.
Yeah. And we do have running water, people. We do have running water.
Yes.
We were just talking about this before I started to record. I live in a really small town, like 60 people, and we do have dirt roads, and so many people from across the country and even the world that I've talked with, like, what? I can't believe you have dirt roads. And I was just sharing with Kristjana too. It's like, yeah, it's kind of it's really something to be grateful for in this moment of when I step out my door, just like you, we step out our doors and we actually hear nature. I was sitting outside this morning and just like, God, it might be small. It might be in the sticks. It might be difficult to have access to things, but I have access to nature anytime I want, right?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. And I'm very thrilled to be having the conversation with you today because you were speaking about something that has not been talked about yet on the podcast and something that I'm sure a lot of, well, as you shared briefly before we started to record, that a lot of people have an opinion about. And so we are going to be talking about the fact that well, you know what? I'll let you share. So what brings you to Grieving Voices?
Okay. Yes. I'm so glad to be here and share the story because I think that, when you're co-parenting, you already have to navigate like such a different plan and structure. And with my situation, it was like a whole new level of learning how to co-parent. So I was previously married. We ended up getting a divorce. We had a 2.5-year-old little one, and we started 50-50 co-parenting. And a few years later, I met and fell in love with my now spouse, and he was in the military, still is in the military, and he was stationed across the state, which, I mean, I guess lucky for us, it was still in the same state, just 5 hours away. And for the first year of our marriage, I stayed apart from him, still living in the same town as my ex and my daughter, still, co-parenting, 50-50, doing all the things. And my husband lived across the state and we would just commute back and forth. And we had 2 homes, 2 sets of utilities. And if you've ever done that, you totally know what that's like to just have to budget for that. And so I think that there was just already that layer of stress and being a newlywed, couple and having to commute and live apart. And after the first year, we found out that I was pregnant. And obviously the question came up, are you going to relocate and go live with your spouse, or are you going to stay here? And so this was something that was just on my mind for months and just weighed on my mind. And I think there was just so many questions like, what do I do? What is the best choice? What is the best option for me, for him, for a new baby, for my child who was 4 or 5 at the time? And this just ate at me and ate at me. And anybody that I would tell because this is just like a common thing that would come up in conversations, right? Because I was living apart from my spouse, I was now pregnant, and I was also co-parenting. So it was something that was discussed a lot, or just naturally brought up, like, oh, where's your husband? And oh, you're pregnant? Like, wow, you live apart? Whoa, like, so it just always came up. And so there was this added stress of everyone feeling the need to let me know their opinions and thoughts about what I should do and what the best option was, or maybe how I would feel depending on what option I chose. And so I remember going to her Christmas program, her kindergarten Christmas program. And I naturally did everything alone because my spouse was out here. He couldn't make it back for a lot of the activities. And I was sitting in the back row alone. And I looked up, and this is making me emotional. I haven't really talked about this in a while. And her dad was there with his new wife, and both of their families were there, like huge families with brothers and sisters and cousins and grandparents, like everyone was there. And it just hit me, and I immediately knew that I couldn't take her. I couldn't take her with me. And not just because I didn't think that she belonged with me because I'm her mother, but because I truly believe that just because I am the mom doesn't necessarily mean that I'm like the better parent or the more suited parent. I mean, both of us love her unconditionally and take care of her 100%. But I think it was a peaceful feeling, but it was also heart-wrenching. And I think that so many questions still followed after that choice. Like, what will this do in the long run? How will this affect her in the long run? Will she think that I abandoned her? Will she think, that I chose Kurt over her? And if so, I mean, how will that affect, like the choices she makes? So there was a lot of just heartache. And I think that heartache would have come no matter what choice I made, like whether I would have chose to stay in the same town and, have this new baby away from my partner, or, whether I would have done what I did and came out here. So I think that it was just a very emotional thing that I really wasn't sure. I had no idea how I would feel. I had no idea how others would feel, others as in her, or what that was going to look like for co-parenting, because, I wouldn't have her 50-50 anymore. It was going to look differently. But I made this choice, and we've been here now for 3 years, and I drive back every other weekend, and she's with us, on rotating holidays and in the summer. And it's still hard. Like, there's nothing that has been easy or better. It's just a whole new set of challenges and life. That's it.
And that's a lot. I can't, like, that moment where you realize that you couldn't take her with, it's this moment of, I mean, really describe that to people, what that sacrifice feels like, because I think that as mothers, we do sacrifice a lot of ourselves, but for our children, I think there's a different connection, a mother to child, that other people who don't have that, or even their counterpart, the other parent, can't understand.
Right.
So can you speak to that a little bit, what that knowing of what that sacrifice, like, really, what did that feel like?
Wow. Like I had mentioned, I mean, I think once that I, like, in that moment, of course, this had been weighing on me, weighing on my mind, my shoulders. I remember being almost like physically ill for several months, and not even just because I was pregnant, but because of this this choice that needed to be made. And so I remember sitting there and having that feeling come over me. And like I said, it was a peace in knowing that her staying, she was still going to be very much loved and taken care of. But it was so scary. And also so, I think I felt guilty. I felt guilty for thinking that it was an option to leave. And I think that since, I mean, it's been 3 years since this choice was made, but I think since then, I've just read different things or experienced different things where I'm like, it's been a comfort a little bit. So like even reading Untamed by Glennon Doyle, she talks about how oftentimes mothers become like martyrs once they have kids. Like it's like, oh, now I'm a mom and now I like, that is my job, is to like mother you, and you are like the center of my world. So I totally understand that. And I now have 3 children, and I do get that. But I also think that I've also tried to live my life where my children are a huge part of my world, but they're an extension of me. They don't define me. They don't define all that I am. And so I think that it's been, as hard as it's been, and as, you know, the guilt that came with it, the questioning, I also think that this was the choice that I needed to make. And I think that even just like reading that book or hearing from other people that, yeah, they may not have had the same experience, but so, you know, kind of the same, like even thinking about military spouses, sometimes like the active duty spouse will get deployed for a year or 2 years, and that spouse is left home with the children. And so I think kind of like in our case, I'm lucky to where I still get to see her all the time, very frequently. And luckily enough, with FaceTime and Zoom, I mean, we can FaceTime really whenever we feel like it, or hop on the call. And it's not that I feel like I'm necessarily missing out. I think I've really had to try and put my feelings aside and just think about how can I best support her in this, because it must be really hard to live with a parent, you know, who parents this way, and then also a parent who parents a completely different way, and manage having the commute, like 5 hours. If she's going to come, she has to sit in a car for 5 hours, and then when she goes back, another 5 hours. So it's been I've had to really focus on how can I, you know, support her through this, validate her feelings, and not make it about me. And I think that's been, you know, eye-opening as well. I think that sometimes I think that I'm selfless, and then you're put in these situations, and, you know, it's like, oh, poor me, or this is so hard for me. And I'm like, oh, but it has to be doubly hard, you know, for her. Like she already has divorced parents. It's probably even extra to now have to think about the distance that's between us. So I think that was really humbling throughout this entire journey.
As I'm listening to you, I'm like, wow, it's a lot of emotional intelligence right there. Did you always have that, or has that been part of your growth through this experience? Like what, because the way you talk about it now, it is like this piece in knowing that you made the right decision, and you continue to make the right decision, but also this really strong empathetic compassion to really put yourself in her shoes. And I think really that's what is oftentimes missed when it comes to children, because children is seen as resilient.
Mm-hmm.
And that drives me nuts. It really does, because children don't choose to be resilient. They're put in the position to have to be resilient.
Yes.
And
Wow.
so
Yeah.
I'm curious how that evolved for you. Like, was that just something that's innate in you, or do you feel like that's something that is, have you had previous experiences? I guess I'm going to get to the deep part. Have you had previous experiences in your childhood that have shaped how you came to this decision and how you've continued to navigate it?
Yeah, that is a really great question. And no, I don't think that it was just natural for me, because I think that, and I mean, maybe other women who are mothers can relate, is as a mother, I naturally feel like my children should be with me. Like, I'm the mom, I'm organized, I'm dependable, I have their schedules memorized, like I'm versatile, I can multitask. Whereas, not saying that my spouse isn't like a phenomenal dad, but it's just a totally different, like, he's way more like laid back and like, oh, I didn't realize that all of these things went into, getting everybody ready in the morning. Like, it's just such a different aspect. So when I was thinking about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, her dad is a wonderful dad, and he has a spouse now, a partner that can help him, but will they take care of her as good as me? But then I almost had to, then there was like another voice in my head that was like, she will be taken care of. Like, it's okay. So I think that it was like this almost, two voices in my head, where it was, of course, those questions came up, or, I would have done that differently. But I think that that's just natural, whether you are divorced or whether or not you live in the same house with your partner. Like, I think it's very natural to probably have those questions like, oh, I could have, done that a little bit better. I wouldn't have done that exactly, the way you did. But I also think that growing up, I mean, my parents got divorced when I was 14, but it wasn't really a surprise to me. They didn't really have a great relationship. I remember wondering if they would get divorced growing up, just like having that question. I believe I even asked my mom that a few different times. And then, my dad made a choice, when I think I was, a freshman or a sophomore, and they decided to split. And it was almost more of like refreshing that it wasn't like a elephant in the room anymore. It was just like, oh, okay, it's finally happened. That's great. And I think that kind of like what you touched on is that people say that all the time is, oh, well, you're resilient, you'll be fine. And I think that that is so normalized. Like, you'll be fine. I mean, we even say it like consistently, like, oh, it's fine. It's okay. Like, I'm okay. I'll be fine. And I don't think that we validate our children's feelings enough. I mean, and I'm still working on that, and not telling them how they feel. Like, oh, you'll be okay. Which obviously, I think, looking at big picture, like, yes, she will learn how to deal with it or cope with it, and ultimately, quote unquote, should be fine. But I still think that it's so important to validate that she's upset right now, or sad right now, or has questions about it, and, struggles with not wanting to drive across the state, which I totally understand. Or now that she has, two siblings here and a sibling there, it's hard for her. And I think that just me showing up and saying like, wow, yeah, that sounds really hard. Like, I'm here to listen, instead of being like, well, you'll be fine. It's fine. Like, everybody does this, or everybody has siblings. Like, it's a part of life. I think that instead of brushing it off, it's just so important. And I think that I wish that I would have had that. And I think that, all of us as adults now can look back on our childhood and be like, oh, wow, okay, like, this is maybe why my parents acted the way they did, or this is how I wish I would have been talked to or looked at. And I think that that's all we can do now as parents and adults, is to change that and try to do better for them, so that they can eventually do better than us. And that's really just all I'm trying to do. And each day is still learning, and learning how to navigate it, especially as she gets older and has different questions and different frustrations and struggles. It's so different, and each child is so different with how you parent them and how you show up for them. And so it's truly never ending. I remember reading this blog, and I felt very drawn to it because the writer was also an aerialist. And so I was like, oh, I wonder what she has to say about being an acrobat mom. And she said kind of the same thing that I could relate to is, as a performer, there's always an end that you're working towards. So there's like always a performance, right? So like in 8 months, you are practicing, you're working really hard for this performance, and then you have the performance, it went great, and like that's it. Like you feel accomplished. But with motherhood, there's never like an end date or like a big performance that you're waiting for, and then like, yay, you've reached it. Like there's always, and then like even after you have your baby, like, okay, pregnancy was hard, or even pregnancy was easy, and then boom, baby comes, and then it's just like something else. Like now your boobs are swelling and you have to worry about like all of these things, your body, and now other kids. And so I'm just like, this parenting journey is just never ending. It's always growing and always figuring out like truly what's best for you, and not allowing other ideas and thoughts of what you should be doing to, hold space in your mind and your thoughts.
Oh, so much to unpack there. And there's so many layers. There's so many layers to your situation because, like you said, there's so many relationships involved, and it's your children and their relationship to their sister and their individual relationships and the grief that they maybe have when they have to say goodbye and all of these things. And like you said, as she grows older and as they grow older, and I'm in the trenches of the teen years right now. Oh, it doesn't get easier. I wish I could say it does, but it just doesn't. I really feel like, and maybe you can attest to this too, like I've been growing up with my kids. Like,
Oh yeah.
And in the personal development world, people will say things like, don't have children for your personal growth journey. But I think that's what naturally happens. I don't think you can bypass that because children are our mirrors.
Oh
If
my gosh, yes.
whatever issues you have in your life personally, like deep down in your soul, like they
Mhm.
will emerge through your
Oh yeah.
kids.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious, you mentioned some things that you resource. I'm curious if there are certain resources and things that you've come across other than the book you mentioned by Glennon Doyle, but have there been things that have definitely helped you navigate all of these pieces of your story?
Yeah, the first little while when I was still like making my decision, I would Google all the time and just try and find anybody who had done this or had experienced like the same things. Oh my gosh, I just kind of went down a rabbit hole of like trying to find blogs or different writings or experiences. And I truly wasn't able to find a ton with like my exact experience. But I also think that that was really great reminder is to follow your intuition, your gut, and actually like turn inward instead of Googling all the time, right? Which I think can just be like a natural thing anymore, is that we like Google, what's this? And so it was just a really great reflection to be like, okay, you've been searching outward for so long and allowing other people's opinions and ideas to, just kind of fill your mind. Let's just sit back and like think for a little bit, just like, and really marinate on what feels good to you, what's going to be best for, you and Kurt, new baby, for Lily, for everybody that's involved. And I think that that was where more of the peace came, because I think that when I was searching for outward validation, and I truly was, like, I was seeking for somebody to be like, oh, Chris, it'll be so, this is how you'll feel. It will go well. And I truly was seeking for that. And I mean, it never came. And I said, okay, well, how can I create the situation that I want? I'm also a huge advocate for nothing is ever permanent. So, and I mean, I was very upfront with my partner as well. And I just said, okay, this is what I feel like is the best going forward, but nothing is ever permanent. So if this really has like a huge impact on her and we can see that it's like affecting her, I would like to leave it open that I could potentially move back, or that we could revisit the situation and see what other options we have. Because I think sometimes we get so stuck in this like tunnel vision of these are our options, A or B, and that is it. When really there's like 28 other doors surrounding us that we haven't even opened yet. And so I think that just being in communication with everybody and really having our child at the forefront of, okay, like what's best for her, what's going to work out, let's really listen. Let's listen to her teachers if it's affecting her at school, if it's affecting her, personal life or whatever it is, then we can revisit this. But ultimately, when we look back, I mean, all of her teachers, I would almost be like, wow, like she is very settled and very like happy, and is just adjusting really, really well. It has never been like an issue ever. And I think that was also comforting to know that she really, like, she could thrive. And as comforting as it was also a little bit of, I think that I had to take the weight off of, your kids will only thrive like with you as their mother there, when I'm like, really, she knows I'm in her corner. She knows that I will always be there for her no matter what, but I don't need to be there with her 24/7 for her to be a thriving young woman. I mean, she has friends and a wonderful stepmother and family. And so I think that it was almost like it hurt a little bit, because I was like, oh, like she doesn't need me in the sense of like there with her 24/7, if that makes sense.
No, it
Which,
does. And
which kind of hurts a little bit, because you would like to think like, I'm the mom, they need me. She's going to be so sad. Not saying that she doesn't miss me, but it's just, it was definitely different than what I had like envisioned or created in your mind, which I think we all know that is when we let our mind just kind of take over, it always goes to like the worst scenario. Like, this is going to happen. It's going to be awful. And really reality was not that at all.
well, and I think too, like, I think when this is where I think our childhoods greatly impact us in ways in our adulthood and influence our parenting in ways that we really don't understand or comprehend or really even connect the dots and think about. Because, if we, because as mothers, and I can speak for this for myself, but when my youngest went off to kindergarten, I had this midlife unraveling because I wrapped so much of myself and my identity into being a stay at home or work at home mom.
Yeah.
And so when that was gone, when I realized that that attachment, like, oh, well, they don't need me as much, they're becoming more independent, which is really what I wanted deep down, because I had to grow up very independent. I had to be resourceful and, depend on my own wits and really raised myself in a lot of ways. And so I think that has greatly influenced me, especially now after I've kind of worked through and done a lot of inner work. But when we look at our children like they complete us, it can be very smothering to our children and stifle their growth, because we're all of us, we're latching on to something that we feel is slipping away, but that is really a projection and a reflection of us and what's going on in us. And
Yeah.
so I think it takes a lot of introspection and to really look at the situation for what it is and what is best for them, with your feelings and your emotion and your ego set aside. And that's really hard for people to do. And so I commend you.
Another part of Glennon's book talked about that part that you just brought up, was showing your children that you are following your dreams and like living your passion, and really doing, like, showing them that you're still living your life, because then it like allows them to feel like, wow, like I can live my life. Whereas I think that, I mean, when you watch somebody, your mother or your father, that's holding back, then I think that that could potentially affect you later. Like, oh, it's scary out there. Or, my dad has always stayed in this place and has never really ventured out. Like, is it scary out there? Maybe I just won't do that. And kind of the same thing. So I really like to make sure that my kids are seeing that I'm still doing all of these things that bring passion and light and love into my life, and to share those things with them, so that eventually when they decide to leave or whatever they decide, that they will feel like, oh, I watched my mom do it, like I can do it too. Or whatever it is, whether it's, I mean, she watched me go through a divorce, and then she watched me find love, and she watched me, perform, and she's watched me travel, and she's also watched me grow a business. And so I think that all of those things will hopefully inspire her that there's no limit to what she can or can't do. And so I love that you brought that up, is that sometimes when you feel like that's what defines you, it can be scary when you don't have that anymore. And so I think, I'm not going to say luckily, because it's not luck that, we're in the situation that we're in, but I think that I was able to learn that from such an early age, from my kids being so young, that now with my younger two, it's just so different. Like, the dynamic is so different, where I don't ever think that we'll ever reach that point where like they're graduating and then I am like freaking out because I have no idea how I'm gonna, like, what I'm gonna do. I'll probably be like, oh my God, I'm so happy for you. Bye. Come visit us. We'll be here doing this and this. Like, I think it's very just like a liberating feeling to feel like, these humans that we're raising are their own person. Like, we're just there to guide them and support them and validate their feelings and talk to them about all the things and let them know that questions are okay. But then other than that, I'm like, they pretty much will figure it out, for themselves, what feels the best to them. And I think as long as we keep that at the forefront, like, how does this work for you? How does it feel for you? Like, what can we do to support you? I think that that's totally setting them up for success, rather than us dictating all the things all the time.
Right. And being honest, right? Like, being really totally honest, because you could have, I mean, as another transition happens, as your kids get older and maybe things change and the situation has to change, it's like being completely on. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the mark, in that just being honest with your kids of, I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how this is going to turn out, but I want you to know that anything that you concerns or anything that you can talk about it, and you can, it's just giving the child a voice, letting them know that they're heard, and that their concerns are heard, and that they won't be disregarded. You might not make, and letting them know ahead of time, like, I might not make the choice that you want me to make, but I'll make the choice with your heart as in consideration, taking your thoughts into consideration. I think
I love that.
when you involve them in the decision, obviously you can't let them make the decision for you, but I just feel like, I don't know why, I just felt like I needed to mention that.
No, it really truly was perfect, because I heard this reference one time, or maybe not a reference, I don't know. It was like a little story about teaching your children how to trust their feelings. And it was saying, okay, pretend that you're in the back seat you're driving with your mom, you're in the back seat, and a really scary accident happens where, like, you run through a red light, you're spinning around, it's, you're very scary, the car stops, and your mother looks back at you and says, everything's okay, like, we're fine. And immediately you feel this disconnect, because your body is telling you that that was a very scary situation and something bad could have potentially happened. Where, same scenario, the car stops, your mom looks back at you and says, oh my gosh, that was so scary. How do you feel? Like, can you feel your heart beating fast? Like, and kind of walks you through that, and then says, but now we're safe. Let's take a few breaths, and just kind of like walks you through the whole situation. It teaches you that you can trust what you felt, that experience was scary, but you are safe, and it's okay to take a deep breath, cry, whatever you need to do. And I think that teaching your kids from such a young age that, like, to trust how they're feeling, and then to also teach them that they don't always have to be happy. Like, we
Mm,
don't always have to feel good and happy and excited. Like, we can feel mad and sad and worried, and those are all completely natural feelings. And then teaching them also, like, okay, this is what I do when I'm really sad or when I feel anxious. What makes you feel happier when you're, feeling sad or when you're away? And I think just like providing tools, given, age appropriate or whatever tools that they can use, that they know now that they don't always have to show up and act like everything's happy and good.
and be an example of how an adult regulates emotions. I
Oh yeah.
actually had a flashback of something when you were telling that story, because I had a kind of a situation, and my kids were a little bit younger, and we were driving, and I saw the rain clouds. We were just going to get on interstate, and I saw the rain clouds, and I thought, oh boy, I hope it doesn't downpour. And oh, sure enough, it's like I knew in my gut, like, this isn't going to be good. I
Hmm.
get like 10 miles down the road, it just starts downpouring, like so bad. My wipers can't keep up. I'm blinded by the rain. I can't
Oh
see.
yeah.
And I see this 18 wheelers in front of me, and I just started pulling to the side, and I just followed his lights, and I didn't even know. I saw him starting to pull over, but I didn't know, was he over far enough? I didn't know. I just
Right.
followed behind his lights, and I didn't know, like, am I far enough to the side? Am I almost in the ditch? Like, should I go in the ditch? And, because my fear was I'm going to get rear-ended because someone's not going to see me. Oh my God, was that
Yeah.
terrifying? Like, and my
Oh,
daughter, like tears, panicked, like, and I was panicked. Oh my gosh. And my heart rate's just raising, rising, just thinking about it, because it was truly scary for all of us, and I'm one, I can't hide it. Like, it
hmm,
is what it is. It is what it is. But it's being, yeah, emotionally honest, like, oh my gosh, that was really scary. Like, how are you feeling? Like, oh, like, we're
hmm,
okay though. We are okay.
yeah,
So
yes.
yeah, it was like exact situation, just a different scenario. But yeah, what I was gonna say, anger is valid too, right? Like, anger is
Mm,
a total valid emotion. I think sometimes too, like, anger is an unacceptable emotion in a lot of homes. Like, you can't express anger, and so that gets so stuck and stifled in our bodies. And I've seen it in myself, to be honest. I had a lot of anger and resentment, and we say in grief recovery, I'm a grief recovery specialist, we say in grief recovery that resentment is a poison that you take hoping someone else dies. And that's really what
mm,
long held anger becomes, is just really, it's poison in your body.
yeah.
So I think it's very important that as parents, we allow our children to be angry and to
Mhm.
express that. But as adults, we need to emulate what that
What it
regulate
looks like.
looks like. Yes. Like,
Yeah.
and I give myself timeouts. I tell my kids, what? I need a timeout right now.
Mhm.
I need space, because I'm also a UMAP certified coach. And with UMAP, we learn what our values are and how you're wired and things like that. And it's been really eye opening for me too. Just talking about values and thinking about how that when our values are violated or dishonored, that's how much grief that creates for us. And I think if we can understand what each other, especially in a home family unit, what each person values, um, it can create a lot more harmony within a family.
That's
So I
great. I've never
got
heard
to
of
thinking
that.
about that.
Yeah, that's great.
I just got to thinking about it as I was listening to you talk too. Um, so what, let's to kind of circle back to the beginning, because I think it's like I said, I'm excited to talk to you about this, because I think there's a lot of like you said, there was a lot of things said to you that were hurtful. And I want this to be also an educational piece for people, give people a different perspective of loss and grief in a different way. And so what are some of the hurtful and really harmful things that people said?
Yeah. I'm like, "Oh gosh," I've tried to like nod, but I mean, I think that a lot of people just would revert back to like oh my gosh, like, how could you? Like, how could you leave her? And I think that that was a very resounding, like a pretty a common phrase, whether it was those exact words or, you know, a phrase that meant that. I mean, even my attorney, when we were like revisiting the stipulation, because we now needed to put in like it wasn't going to be 50-50, and we had to look at different dates and all of that, she was also kind of like cold, like, oh, you know, you're kind of just like getting yourself in this situation, you know, and like a judge is not ever going to look at your situation and think like, oh, she should be with her mom. Like he's going to be like, well, she, like, that was her choice. And so then, of course, all of those feelings of a little bit of anger, like, well, okay, yeah, it's a choice. And I'm marrying a man who's active duty, but also like he's sacrificing his life to also serve the country. So I think that it's like a little bit different than just being like, hey, like we're choosing to move to Vegas. Bye. Like it was totally not that, but also like made to seem that way. Which of course hurt me because I was physically and emotionally sick. And so it's not like it was an easy decision. It's not like it was taken lightly. And so when people would make their comments, it felt like all of my feelings and worry and ache was just not taken into account, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And, here's something that I think that here's a phrase that I tell myself when I'm encountered with a situation that I don't understand or seems confusing to me, or this is what I say to myself: I don't know what I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people ask themselves that before speaking, I don't know what I don't know, would they really say half the crap they say?
Yeah.
I would hope
Right.
not. But you know what I mean? Like, we
Right.
don't know what we don't know. And
Mm-mm.
so there's, it's almost like when you take out one letter of a word, it changes the entire word.
Exactly.
It's the same thing with situations. Like you take out one little piece or you add in, like just your story itself. There's so many layers to it. If you understand one part of it, you're not understanding the whole picture. You're not getting the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I can just feel, I can put myself in your shoes and just feel that need to like justify.
Yes, justify. And that's what it felt like I was doing all of the time, is just justifying anything and everything, like why I was doing it, how it was going to be beneficial. And then it felt so heavy. It felt so heavy to carry. But like I had said earlier, is that once you stop looking for that outside validation and stop looking for other people to somehow make it you feel better, because it goes back to what you just said, nobody knows the situation like you. So any type of advice that they're going to give you is not really going to be in alignment ultimately with your situation, because they only see such a small little tiny piece that really you're the only person who is going to know how it feels to you. So I think that once I really decided, okay, I'm not going to talk to anybody anymore, including my mother, including like my partner's mother, including anybody that had any attachment to me or the situation, I just stopped. I stopped asking, and I just almost at that point, it became like avoidance of the subject altogether. But it wasn't avoidance because I didn't necessarily want to talk about it. It was avoidance because I just decided I didn't want to hear what other people had to say about it. So instead, I would just keep it like very brief and very short. And whatever it was that I ended up saying, you know, I can't even remember because it was several years ago, but I just remembered choosing to just not let it bother me anymore. I was like, I'm the only one that's dealing with all of these emotions, feelings, and thoughts already. Like, I don't want to allow other people's voices in my head. So I think that that was a huge a huge benefit.
And I think that advice can be applied to grief overall in general, just
Yeah.
overall in general. And actually too, like with UMAP, I've learned when with values, people give advice based on their values, what they value. So for example, if I value freedom, I might tell you, or even let's say you value, here's a better example. Let's say you value adventure, and the person that is asking you for advice doesn't value adventure. The person giving the advice might say, "Oh yeah, like just sell all your life savings and take a trip around the world," you know?
Yeah.
Whereas the other person might be, they might, if they actually did that, like, you know what I mean? Or
Right.
if you
Makes
value,
total sense.
yeah, if you value
Mhm.
freedom, you're going to give advice based on that value of freedom. Like, oh, leave your husband then, you know, just leave your husband, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And like you said, it can be like just that information can be used for like all areas of our life. Like when we're giving advice or when we're speaking to say, I don't know what I don't know. Also, what are my values and how am I showing up in this conversation? Maybe I should just validate what they're saying and say, like, I'm here. I'm here to listen to you, whatever it is. Because really, what do most of us want anyways is just somebody to listen. That's it. Like I hardly ever go into a conversation and want them to like work out my problems for me. I usually show up and just want to talk about it. And usually by me talking, I either feel heard and a weight is lifted, or I like solve my own problem by speaking it out loud, right? It's like one of those. And so I'm just like, if we all just showed up more, and I'm not saying that I'm perfect at that and by any means, I always feel like I should solve someone's problems, but usually people don't want that anyway. So just learning how to show up and just that's all you have to say, like, I'm here, whatever you
yeah.
need.
And I think that's a knee-jerk reaction for so many people. And it was me too for a long time. Just, I want to solve it. I want to fix it. I want to
Yeah.
fix you. I want to fix it for you. I want you happy, you know? And that's the
Yes, I
thing.
want you
Like,
happy.
yeah,
Exactly.
you should be happy because your sadness and your anger and your grief and makes me uncomfortable. So let's fix
Uncomfortable.
you, you know? So let's
Mhm.
fix you. You're the
Oh, I
problem.
I
Yeah.
even noticed too, like my mom is very emotional. She cries usually when we talk. And I remember for a while, I'd be like, oh my gosh, stop crying. And I had listened to a podcast or a talk talking about that is usually when we dismiss other people's emotions, it's because it makes us uncomfortable. And like, that is not okay. And so anymore, ever since, because I didn't know what I didn't know, right? And so now I show up and if she feels like crying, I'm just like, I love you. I'm here for you. And I just allow myself to sit in the uncomfortableness and anymore, like, it's not really uncomfortable, like it's not, it just is what it is. And I think that a lot of the time and that can be with anything, right? With race, with marriage, with having kids, with sex, with porn, with anything. We're like, oh, that's super uncomfortable. Don't want to talk about it. Can you not share those things with me? Like, I don't feel comfortable. Or can you please stop talking about that when really, like, it's not our job to like shield what they're talking about. Like we're just there. And if we can't hold space for it, that's a different thing. Like, listen, I'm not in the headspace, but like I can give you 5 minutes or like let me hug you. Like I think that just communicating, being open, being honest, being willing to be uncomfortable, those are all huge things that all of us, I think, could work on at all times. Like it never ends. It's like an always evolving and growing and learning. Always.
Absolutely. And you said what you all said there, the through line to all of that is boundaries, right? You kind of, you didn't mention the word boundaries, but I think when we don't even know what boundaries look like or don't even have our own, we don't have them with other people. And I'm reading a book right now about empaths and healing for empaths. And it's been really like, it's like, oh my gosh, this book is like, this is my life. Like this is, this has been my life because I'm like an energy sponge for people.
Yeah.
I take it all in and really starting to understand my childhood more so because I am so empathic. And
Mhm.
I think if we can understand that too with our children, because, to be told you're a crybaby, or like even what made me think of it was your example of your mom. If she is a highly sensitive person and cries easily, and you're
Mhm.
always told, quit crying, like, don't show your anger, like, don't show your
Right.
emotions, your body, you will process those emotions with your body. And actually,
Mm.
an example of that in the book is actually talking about fibromyalgia, because fibromyalgia has there's like never any pinpoint reason for fibromyalgia. Like, there's never, like, this is what causes it. Like, there's so much, but what it really is this stuck energy. It really is
Oh,
just stuck energy.
wow.
Look at any symptoms, physical symptoms that you have. And if you've gone to doctor after doctor and there is just no known cause, like there's no reason for it, like
Mhm.
nothing, no, there wasn't any trauma or anything. Look at your energy of your physical body and ask yourself, am I a really highly sensitive person? Do I really get physically drained when I'm around a lot of people? Or he talked about like holidays too. Like, it's like the holidays were made to have to like torture an empath. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, yes, that's true. I'm like,
Really fascinating.
this book is like written for me. And so it's
Yeah.
really, yeah. So I think, but circling back and what that has to do with your share is just understanding that we are all built differently, and
Mhm.
that if someone seems to be highly emotional, it could just be that that's how they're built. That's how God made them. That's, you're an empathic, highly sensitive person, and maybe give a little grace.
Mhm.
So, like you
Yeah.
said, I love you, mom. I'm here for you.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. I love all of that reflection. Mhm. Beautiful. And boundaries, 100%. I'm like, girl, we could just talk for 7 more hours, but I think that I mean, I keep like branching off. Like, here's the story, and then here's these little branches off. But to just circle back really quick, I think that once I put those boundaries in place, it changed everything. It changed my energy. It changed how I reacted. It changed my thought process. And it was just way easier to navigate because, yes, of course, this hasn't been like, oh, I made the choice and now I'm super happy. Absolutely not. It has still been a range of emotions of frustration and anger and sadness and grief, right? Like, you just moving through all of it. But it doesn't mean that it's bad. It just is what it is. And as long as I have boundaries around it all, like, it's like a protection, like it protects me and my energy. And if I could give any advice to somebody who's going through any type of grief, because I think it's such a relatable topic, right? We've all gone through it, we've all experienced in some capacity, and all differently, which is the beautiful part about it, is that we can all have such different experiences but be connected through that same emotion and feeling. Is really, I mean, give yourself grace and boundaries and look inward instead of looking outward for comfort, which I think sometimes is an easy. I mean, I definitely looked outward through maybe drinking a bottle of wine to try and not think about it, or just other behaviors that weren't truly self-care. They were more, harmful. And I think it's hard sometimes when you're in the middle of it because you do not want to feel. Sometimes you just want to not have to feel what you're going through. And so you try to mask it with anything that could look like anything. But I think that once you just start to show up more for yourself and not for others, but truly look inward, I think that's what will be like the saving grace of it all and just be able to protect you.
Was there a certain book on boundaries or about boundaries that you found really helpful to you, or a resource that you could share?
You know, I was in therapy for a while, several years ago, and she actually recommended the book Boundaries, which I
I've read
have. I'm
it.
like, I'm looking at it. I did not read it. It's
Oh,
there, and I should. But I really think that a lot of it was self exploration for me because I grew up with no boundaries and my mother doesn't have boundaries. I didn't even know what boundaries were. Like, I honestly thought it was like a service to be available to everyone at all times for anything. Like, I really thought that that's like what you did as a human. And so, up until, I mean, a few years ago, so all of this was culminating at the same time, like my divorce, being a single mother, and then learning how to co-parent, and then also getting remarried and like figuring out life. It all stemmed around not having boundaries and like not even knowing where to start. And so I think that once I just started experimenting, like what that looked like for me, like being like, oh, that doesn't feel good when like somebody shows up at my house unannounced. Oh, I can make a boundary around that. Like, hey, if you're going to stop by, can you just like give me a call quick? Like, oh, that's a boundary. Or I don't really like it when we have guests that stay longer than 3 days. Okay, so like that's a boundary that I have. I know I'm giving like weird, crazy examples, but those were just things that I had to experiment with, experience myself before I even knew. And now, like, I would say I'm pretty solid in the boundary department. Like, I am pretty in tune with myself and like what feels good to me, that I feel extremely comfortable expressing that. Whereas if I were to look back at my early 20s, like, shit show. Like, I felt like my brain was a tornado and I had no idea why. And oh, it's because I wasn't valuing like my time and energy and space. And so once I found these newfound, boundaries and limitations and like certain things, it was a game changer. Game changer.
yeah. I actually read the book Boundaries, and I highly recommend. There are several books out there, but yeah. And boundaries, when we have them, it makes people without boundaries really uncomfortable. Like, you can
Mm-hmm.
be real easily guilted. Like, you're supposed to feel bad because when your example of don't show up at my door unannounced, and it's it's like, I don't like surprises,
Yeah.
so it's like, well, and then you feel like, well, you're not a welcoming person,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So
Yes.
it's like, but I am just not in that way.
Right. Like,
It's
I'm
like,
so welcoming. Come over. I want you to come over. I just want to know that you're coming over. And then I
right.
can like get in that space. But I heard once that once you set boundaries, the people who break them the most are going to be the most pissed off, right? Because
Yeah.
they're the ones who are breaking your boundaries the most. And so I think that, just like you said, it makes people uncomfortable, but and it will make you uncomfortable at first, I think. Like, you'll be like, oh, this feels bad. Like, I feel bad about this. But the more you do it, the more comfortable it becomes. And then the easier it is to express. Like, anymore, like, I don't even like second guess, like, oh, am I gonna like make this person feel a certain way? I'm just like, oh, this is how I feel, like, would love to see you. Just call me in advance. Or, oh, you want to come stay? That's really great. You can stay for like 2 days. We live in like 1,000 square foot house with 3 kids and a cat. Like, there's no room for extra bodies. Like, love you so much, but please don't come over. I don't know. We'll meet you somewhere. So I think it's just, once you get used to setting those boundaries, I think that it becomes, easier.
It's like a muscly flex.
Exactly.
I was gonna, oh, there's something I was gonna say. What the heck was it? Ah, it's about boundaries. Something, oh, children. Here's the one thing too I want to say about boundaries when it comes to children. And so often and I'm guilty of this. When your children are young, especially, it's like, oh, give grandpa and grandma a hug, or,
Yes.
give uncle whatever hug. We tell our kids to,
Consent.
yeah, put them in your, go and get people,
Like, hug this person that's super uncomfortable. You only see them twice a year. Do it anyways. It will make them happy. It will
give me a
make
kiss,
them,
give me a
yes.
kiss, or can I, give me a hug. It's like,
It will
there's
make me
no,
sad if you don't.
yeah,
Hmm.
Yeah, it's like
Like, ew, no.
like your personal space isn't even addressed or
Yes.
respected, or maybe I don't want to hug them, or maybe I don't feel like that, maybe that's not how I express myself. Again, it's like
Right.
letting the child develop and grow into who they are, not who you want them to be, or like you said, to make other people feel comfortable. And those are the early messages we start receiving about boundaries.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
what you want doesn't matter.
Exactly. Oh yeah, right from the get-go. 100%. And I mean, like we've said a few times in this podcast already, is I don't know what I don't know. And it never used to like irritate me or bug me. And I've seen it now that it was brought to my attention that like, oh, this is something that's just like perpetuated in society. Like, oh, here's, 90-year-old grandma, you never see her. We're visiting, a nursing home that you've never been to. You should give her a hug. It'll make her feel so sad if you don't. Like, we're teaching them that their actions, like what they do, it's important to only care about how you're going to make other people feel. And so just like you said, it's setting them up almost for like really bad situations for later on in life, like for if they're dating somebody who wants to cross boundaries, then they remember this overarching theme that was taught to them all growing up, that even if it makes you uncomfortable, you just do it because it makes that person happy. And so, oh my gosh, like now I look at my even like 2-year-old, and like if his grandpa's like, oh, you're not coming up to the cabin with us, it's going to make me so sad. I'm like, oh, doesn't matter. He doesn't want to do it. It's okay if you make Papa sad. Like, how do you feel about it? Like, it's very like intentionally teaching them to honor how they feel instead of how they're going to make, somebody else feel.
Well, and again, it circles back to the early lesson of how we look to others to validate us. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we grow up that way, we're going to look to others to make us happy, to make
Yeah.
us feel better. And really, that's an inside job.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So, what throughout this whole experience, what has given you the most joy?
Mm. I think, I mean, being able to be with your partner is great. It was super hard for us emotionally to live apart. So us being together has been wonderful. And I mean, even through like deployments and stuff, it's still nice to know like we've built a home. But that's also like the flexibility of it as well, is that like if he's going to be gone for 2 months, then I can now travel like across the state and to maybe be with her a little bit more. So I think just the what is that? There's just like having a support of a partner who truly does get it and who's truly there to like support you, help you through it all. He never has told me once, like, you know, this is how it's affected me or anything like that. Like, it's always about like, I know that this has been hard for you, how can we make this better? Like, it's been extremely comforting to have a partner who's very supportive of it all. And really, I think that it's opened my eyes to like who I am, parts of my personality that I had to work on or that were like shown to me through this whole thing, is that, you can look at life and situations differently. It doesn't need to be like because it's a societal norm, like you have to fit into this box, like, or this is how you will feel if you do this. Like, I think that it's taught me that I can do hard things, and that most of the time our brains just make up this like awful shit that will happen, and ultimately that's not really what ends up happening. So I think that it's just, you know the the remembrance that, and I know we talked about this earlier because I said we say all the time like, I'm fine, I'm okay, like I'm fine, I'll get through it. And so I'm not trying to make light of that, because it really, I am fine ultimately, but I also want to reiterate that this isn't just like the end journey where I feel like one way about it all the time. It's still very much so like a journey of feeling all of the things, of feeling sad and like allowing myself to feel sad about it, or and to not live in that sadness, but to just be like, I'm having a really sad day today. Like, I really wish that she was here with us, or I really wish that I was there. And then maybe, if I experience happiness, the next day, like that's great. Or if I experience like longing or yearning for, just to like see her. I mean, that's what's nice about FaceTime too. So I think that just allowing myself to feel all of it and to realize that like that's just a part of life as well. Like you're not ever just going to be like super happy all the time, that this is just like making the best out of the situation and being willing to pivot if we need to. And yeah, having a supportive partner, I think has made things a lot easier.
And having the hope that it's not permanent.
Yeah, exactly.
Just the hope that you'll thrive together.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing too. I just want to highlight the fact that there are two sets of parents raising this child who are all co-parenting, who are looking at the best interest of her. And it may not be perfect, but just the fact that you can speak so highly of the stepmom and you speak so highly of her father, and I'm sure vice versa, it just says a lot about everyone involved. And so I just want to celebrate you and what you and your family and everyone involved has this created this loving environment with this goal of just helping her thrive. And so I think that is going to leave such a lasting impact on her. And so give yourself a pat on the back for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that as long as we continue to have that goal of just all of us there to support, validate, help her through whatever it is, and just be on the same page, I think ultimately, like you said, I mean, we're setting her up for success in that sense. So yeah, it's definitely been a journey, 100% filled with all of the emotions and feelings, but we're blessed. We really are blessed to have such a great relationship and partnership when it comes to raising her.
I just think it's amazing. I really do.
Thank you.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
I don't think so. I'm like, gosh, I talked forever, an hour.
No, I think
sometimes I like jump off and I'm just like, and this and this and this and this, but hopefully somebody out there that's listening can feel comfort or understood or heard, or I don't know. I think that that's one reason, I mean, I like sharing this story, is that I know we're talking about not seeking outward, a validation, but I think that I even just wanted to hear of somebody else that had to go through something like this and I couldn't find it. Like I searched and searched for, I mean, oh my gosh, everywhere it seemed, and I just couldn't find it. And so I feel like even just by sharing this story of, even if it's just as simple as like the co-parenting aspect, I mean, I think it brings comfort that like, okay, I'm not the only one going through this. My feelings are validated. Okay, it's totally natural to have all of the feelings. Like I don't need to feel settled all the time. Like I can feel upset or worried or scared at any point of this journey, even 10 years in or however. Like I think by sharing our stories is where we truly can connect with people. And I always just hope that somebody on the other end can feel heard and seen, and even just like a little bit of peace in their heart. So yeah,
I actually think it's important to validate people's feelings. I think in the context of validating the decisions we make, that's where we can hurt ourselves, because if we are looking to others to validate our decisions, that's where we aren't trusting ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not, and if we can't fully trust ourselves, then that's kind of a scary place to be, right? That's
totally.
You're never really confident in the choices you make. So I
Mhm.
just wanted to make that distinction that yes, validate, look for validation of your feelings, but at the same time, the difference is if you're trying to validate your choices and decisions that you're
Yeah.
making. I, like you said, trust your intuition, go with your gut. Like that's what
Mhm.
really matters, because people will always give their values based advice, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing your story. It's it's like a tapestry, so many different
Mm.
colors and layers, and I just think it's a beautiful thing that you've created in despite the all the unknowns that you've had
Yeah.
to navigate. So thank you again. And where can people reach you if they'd like to connect with you?
Yeah, I feel like I'm most present either on the podcast, which is the Red Door, or on my Instagram, which is just my name, Kristjana_Hillberg. And I would love to connect. Would love, love, love it. I always love having people on the podcast who want to share their story, or if you want to just connect on Instagram, I'm all about it.
Perfect. And I will put the links to the show notes as well as any resources that were mentioned.
Cool.
And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.